Hello. I just wanted to briefly speak with you about this essay assignment. Essay 1, Living in a Consumer Culture. So I have included for you, and I'm not going to read this to you. I know you're capable of reading for yourselves. Um, I have given you just some background thoughts, what we have been reading together that you will now be taking to process and reflect upon in your own essay. I've given you some questions to think about as you pre-write. And if you'll notice, all of these questions have to do with you specifically, your patterns, your habits. The assignment is for you to write a 3 to 5 page essay examining your own personal consumer choices using Steve McKevitt's essay titled Everything Now as a source that you will interact with. Now, the main pitfall that I have noticed over some time students fall into is that they make general statements about people, society, Americans, all right? You are not asked to do that here. You are asked to provide a detailed description and then analysis of your own situation. So what you need to do, excuse me for that, what you need to do is, if there are general observations you want to include, then you want to use Steve McKevitt as your source for making those, all right? Quoting, summarizing him, and giving him credit for those ideas. So I wanted to alert you to that main pitfall that will cause students to lose a lot of points, okay? And this takes time. It takes time for you to gather details, to gather notes, to pay attention to the description of your own interaction in a consumer-oriented society. You can think about what do you spend money on? You can think about what you don't spend money on. It's certainly possible that you are going against the grain of our consumer culture, and that's fine. You can write about that. You can provide a detailed description of how you do that. Okay. So there's some required components to summarize what McKevitt says, to include some quotations that you will respond to evaluate what he says, judging the relevance to your situation. Now, I have included the idea that you may, in fact, be influenced by people who you are very close to, perhaps live with, that their consumer habits may also impact you. So that's another way that you, those are more details, I should say, that you might include. Then make sure that you're responding to those claims with a personal narrative that describes your habits, giving us concrete details, and referring back to McKevitt's source. And ideally, you want to not just describe, but to evaluate habits and choices, sharing insights. So some tips to remember. In a sense, your thesis is the point that you're making about your consumer choices, your behavior. Be specific. And I've given you some examples here of something that's vague versus something that is specific and includes concrete details. So in the detailed example, you have, for instance, a situation. We'd gone over to Seattle to a Seahawks game. The tickets for that weren't in my budget. A week later, I found out I was short on money. Again, this is a very concrete situation that the reader can easily follow. Now, remember, though, that McKevitt is a required source. You do not get to just exclusively describe your situation here. You need to be summarizing and then evaluating the claims that McKevitt makes. Okay, now I've given you some hints here about how to correctly use the works cited. And I have also reminded you that the reader of your essay has not read this essay. So they do not know who Steve McKevitt is or what he has said in an essay. You need to thoroughly describe any claim that you pass on, not just make a statement that mentions it in passing. I've given you a hint about how to organize the essay, so look at that and see if it's at all possible for you to make use of that organizational plan. And then be sure to remember that you're going to be using a writer's memo as you turn in a final draft. So from the beginning, if you open up a Google Doc and make notes for yourself as you are pre-writing, planning, let's just say that you remember a detail. You're going through your day, you're doing other things, and something reminds you of a detail that you could include in this essay. If you can get it in that Google Doc, then you'll have it stored for yourself to use in the future as you are drafting. And you want to describe in the Google Doc what you did. So you could say, put the date and then say, I spent, an hour rereading McKevitt's essay. I noticed that he discussed such and such and such, right? That made me think about such and such and such, right? So those are the details that you will then use and select from to craft your writer's memo, which functions as an introduction to the essay. All right, I wanted to keep this brief. Again, I know you can read this assignment, but I just wanted to kind of hit some highlights for you. I think that, like many, many students, you're going to find that you actually enjoy doing this thinking, exploring, and writing.